Welcome to another Acumatica tutorial. My name is Zach Mayer with the Mayer Group, and today we're going to be discussing items. So I'm going to go right into my Acumatica demo company here, and we have a few different ways that we can navigate to the items forms. So the first way is going to be using universal search at the top of the screen here, and if we type in item, we're going to see all the different item related forms appear in our search window here. So today we're going to be taking a look at stock items, non-stock items, and item classes, and all three of those fall under the inventory category here. So the other way to navigate to those, if we didn't want to use universal search, is we could also navigate over to the inventory section in the sidebar here, click on that, and locate them through the screen here. Now they may not all appear. We do see stock and non-stock items over here in the profiles, but if we click on show all, it'll take us to our full menu, and we can see our item classes over here in the preferences. Now again, to go between those full and quick menus, you can always click on the header as well. And then if you click on the gear icon, you can select which ones appear in your quick menu. So we could go ahead and add that item classes to our quick menu. So now we see that showing over here in preferences. So first I'm going to go to my stock items form. And once this loads, we're going to see a list of all the stock items that I have currently saved in my system here. Now we see a bunch of different columns, and of course we can always change the columns shown in the top left corner of the table. And we have our selected columns as well as our available columns. So if we wanted to add or remove any, we could do that through here. We can also create some filters through a few different ways. So the first way is just going to be simply clicking on any of these headers. So let's say we wanted to filter the type. We see all the different types that are options here, and we can unselect them. We could clear them all and just select one, or we can, of course, select all of them. Now the other way to filter is going to be the filter icon over here towards the right of the header. And we can define filters here, and we can just apply them once, or we could share them with other users on the system, make it the default filter, or we can save it. And what happens when you save a filter is it's going to appear as a new tab up here at the top of the form. So we have our all records form by default, which shows all of our stock items, whether they're active or inactive, whether they are finished goods or components. It's going to show everything. But we can filter it down and create save filters to show our active stock items, for example. So this is only going to be items that have an active status. Or in this case, I also created a filter that only shows us our finished goods. We see all the types here are finished goods. So you have a lot of power by creating saved filters to quickly toggle back and forth between different sets of information. Now once we create a new record using the plus icon, or we click on one of our items, we're going to see some more information on the stock item itself. So I'm going to look at this active moist light oil-free lotion here, and it's going to take us to the stock items form. So at the top, we're going to see our inventory ID that we just selected from the table, as well as the status, which is currently active. Now, of course, if we wanted to deactivate that, we could do it through here, as well as a description of our item. Now we have a couple different tabs we're going to discuss, and the first is going to be General Settings. So here under the item defaults, we see our item class. Now we did see the item class form on our inventory sidebar in the preferences here, but another way to quickly access that item class form is just to click on this pencil icon to the right of the selected item class. So it's going to open our item classes form here in a new window, and this is exactly what it would look like if we selected it from our menu as well. So on the left side of the screen, we have our item class tree, and it automatically selected our moisturizers class because of us picking it directly from inside the stock item. So if you pick any of these, so we'll look at moisturizer since that's the one it picked for us. Here's the information about the moisturizer stock item class on the right side of the screen here. So we have our class ID, which is moisturizers. That's our description. Moisture is the class ID here in all caps. And again, you can also select any of them from this magnifying glass as well. Here we see that it's a stock item class because we have stock item selected. We could also unselect that and just have it be a item class for non-stock items, for example. You could also allow negative quantities if you wanted to check that box off. And then we have a few other options down here, including if it's a finished good component or subassembly for the item type. You have your valuation method and your tax category. You also have your posting class. And again, if you wanted to drill into any of these further, so for our posting class, for example, if we wanted to change that or create a new one, we could once again click on that pencil icon, and now we have our posting class form open. So here's all the details for our default posting class. So we see all these settings here. and we can select between inventory, item, warehouse, or posting class for each of these, as well as the GL accounts that are going to be associated with this default posting class. We also have our lot or serial class information. So for this item, we have it non-lotted, but we could also change that to lotted or any other type of serial class information that we have saved in the system. Now, as far as the required fields, we do have our availability calculation rule. So in this case, we only have a default one available, but again, if we wanted to create a new one, you could click on that pencil icon, add a new record, and create a new availability calculation rule, and then select which rules you would like to check off here. Down here we have our shipping thresholds for undership and overship, and then our required units of measure. So we have our base unit, sales unit, purchase unit. Now they are all each in this case, but if we wanted to change that to a different unit of measure, we can. And if we wanted to add a conversion, it's really easy to do that by selecting a from unit here from our system. So let's say we wanted to use piece. You can multiply or divide, put your conversion factor. So let's say we want to make it 2.5 in this case to our unit of each. So really easy to have conversions in here, and you can have more than one if you want to do that as well. And down here we have our price management section as well, where you can pick a work group or manager. Next tab is going to be replenishment settings. So here we have a replenishment class ID, and again you can delete a row, add a row as always, but this row we already have saved in here. We have PUR as our class ID. Now if you don't know what that class ID is, you can't remember what it stands for, really easy to click on it and open up more information on that class. So now we have our replenishment classes showing, and we see that PUR is our purchase parts replenishment class. We can do the same thing for our seasonality. So in this case, we only have a none seasonality, but if we had a different code in here, we wanted to look up the ID, and we see the start and end dates and all that information, we could just click on that as well. We see our source as purchase. We have our warehouse selected as our main warehouse, but if we wanted to change that, we could. We also see our launch date, termination date, and our service level percentage, and all that information for the replenishment settings. We also have our demand calculation up here at the top of the section, and you can choose between item class settings or hard demand only. Next tab will be any restriction groups you want to add to your item class, and then finally some attributes. So in this case we have our old part number attribute selected here. We see that it is marked as active but not required. So you have all those options to play around with here. Now if we exit out, it's going to take us back to our stock items form. We can move on to our second tab, which is going to be our price and cost information. So if you want to add a price class, workgroup manager, you could do that here, as well as any minimum or markup percentages you want to add in here, as well as our default price, which in this case we've defined as $4. Now here you have all of your cost information, and a lot of this could be automatically calculated based on any purchases you've made in the system for this item, or any production orders in this case where you're producing the item. Those costs will appear here. But you could also define a last cost. So if you want to have a starting point, you could define what that cost was, and we could pretend that it was, in this case, 43 cents. There we go. And that's going to be our last cost saved in the system here. And of course, if we were to have any more orders coming in, or we're producing more of this light oil lotion, we can then have the average cost start to be determined, as well as our minimum and maximum cost over time. Now for manufacturing, we have a default bill of materials here, which is just a test bill of materials for this demo company. You could define a separate bill of materials for your planning BOM, and you could again open that BOM form here, and you can create more of them, or maybe you need to create a new revision for this test bill of material, you could do that. You have all different drop downs to select from for your manufacturing, but then down here we're going to see our safety stock and reorder point, which are both automatically filled in for us, but we can always override them by checking that checkbox if we wanted to do that and change the value. We also can define a minimum and maximum order quantity or lot size if we want to do that. Here we're going to have our warehouse details. So we see here that we've attached our main warehouse to this item. We can always change that if we needed to, but we see it's our default here. We see the information about this specific warehouse, so we see that the inventory account is entered in here, and we see that we currently have 21,451 units of this item stored in that warehouse. We also see that we have a preferred vendor associated with this warehouse and the item, and we find that on our vendor details tab, where we see it's a vendor named Lotion Crafters. We've associated them as the default vendor here. Their purchase unit is carried over from our unit of measure, and we could define any order details that we want as far as minimum or maximum quantity, the last vendor price. We could put all that information in this tab. Here we're going to see that old part number attribute carried over from the item class, but we could also add an image if we wanted to do that, so we could browse our computer and upload an image here. For packaging, we're going to see a default weight with a weight unit of measure, as well as a volume. So you could define any of the information here if it were to change, or you wanted to change your unit of measure. You could do that from this section here, as well as, again, we see the shipping thresholds of our undership and overship. You could add any cross-referencing that you may need to. So you can select between customer and vendor part numbers, global or barcode, and then input a vendor or customer into here. Here we're going to have our replenishment information again. So we see that still has none seasonality, so some of this information we've seen before. We also see a replenishment class, which if we click on that, it shows it's our manufactured this time around rather than purchase parts. We have a fixed reorder quantity with our 84% level service level. Safety stock again is 25, reorder point 50. Our max quantity we see is 100. And we have some information down here. And again, if you want to drag any of these columns out, if you can't read them all, we see our forecast period type is month. Here we're going to have our GL accounts. Now a lot of these are going to be pulled in from the item class again as default values, but you can override any of them by selecting a new class from any of the classes that are saved in the system. So if you want a new cost of goods sold account, you can do that. And then finally, we see these gray arrows over here. Now that means that there's another tab or multiple tabs that cannot fit on the screen here. So if we click on that, we're going to see description. Now here we can just type a brief description of the item if we wanted to do that in this text box here, and we also have the ability to insert an image or a link. So that is a quick overview of stock items. Now if we switch over to non-stock, we're going to see that overall it's going to look pretty similar. So the same table is displayed here. Now we see most of these are going to be expenses, services, labor, rather than the finished goods that we saw on the stock items form. But if we want to look at our hotels and lodging accommodation, we see this as an active non-stock item. Now a lot of this looks pretty similar. We have our item class defined, our posting class, our tax category. All that's going to look the same, as well as our units of measure. But we do see a conversion here. So we see a from minute multiplying minute to hour. So we have that stored right into this non-stock item. Here again we have our price and costing information. Now there is no default price stored for the hotel and lodging, because that may be a more variable price depending on which hotel. So you don't have to have that default stored in here if you don't want to, as well as a default cost value, but you can input that in this tab if you want to do that. No default vendor associated here either, but again, you have that ability to add in one or multiple vendors if you want to associate one with this specific non-stock item. We see that cross-reference tab that looks the same as our stock items. Packaging again with our weight and volume information. We again have some GL accounts that were pulled in from the expense item class this time around rather than the item class that we had associated with the stock item. So we see all of our different non-stock item classes here. And those are once again determined from our item class tree based on that stock item checkbox. In this case, any of them that were not checked, we could select for a non-stock item. We have our attributes again. No attributes being pulled in from the item class, but we could still upload an image if we wanted to do that, or add a sales category. And then finally, that description tab where we can write up a description of this non-stock item, and again, insert those images or links if we want to do that, or a table of information. So that's going to be a quick overview of the non-stock items, pretty similar to the stock items. But if you have any questions on creating a stock or non-stock item, an item class, anything like that, don't hesitate to reach out to the Mega Group and we'd be happy to help you out with that. We will definitely have some more Acumatica tutorials coming out soon as well, so keep an eye out for those, and thanks for watching.